Okay, so hello friends. So we are starting a new series that is Web API, ASP.NET Web API, and this is the first chapter in this series. Okay, and in this session we will learn what is Web API and uh, what is the difference between Web API and WCF services. Okay, as well as in this session we will have an introduction with the Visual Studio 17 Web API project. Okay, so before going into what is an Web API, so we will open Visual Studio and we will see how we can take Web API project. Okay, so let's flip to Visual Studio. So from search option, you can open Visual Studio 17. So make sure whenever you are working on the Web API, you have to run this application as an administrator. Okay. So once you open this as an administrator, it will shows in the round bracket as it is opened with the administration rights. Okay. Now uh, the file menu, we have a new option, and from new we can take a new project. Okay. So once you take a new project, you will find like this many options like Visual C Sharp, then web application, then Azure, these options. So we have to select web application from this left side panel. And from these templates, there are two templates in the web section. So the first template is for .NET Core application and other is for .NET Framework application. So we have to always select .NET Framework application. Okay. So here we have to give the project name. So I'm giving like Web API project. Okay, this is the solution name. We have already seen these things in Visual Studio 10, right? So these things are same here. Now click on OK button. So once you click on OK button, you will find this window here like ASP.NET Web Application and your project name, right? So in this window, you can see that there is empty project, then web forms project, MVC, web API, single page application. So these are different kind of applications options they have given here. So we have to select the project which we want. If you select empty, so it will create an empty project which will have a like it will not have web config or any configuration which pre-required for the projects. We have to create all the things from scratch in the empty project. So always take uh, web form MVC or web API project when we are working on the web-based applications. So if you will take a web form, so it will create a ASP.NET project, okay, with the prerequisite requisite files and setting. So and if you will select MVC template option, so it will create MVC project. In MVC also you can select like web form. So it will create a web application, ASP.NET application with MVC architecture. Okay, or if you will select only MVC, in that case it will create MVC project. Okay, then we have web API options also in the MVC project, so we can merge MVC and web API in the same application. But in the project which we are going to work on, and the project is Standard Metal. In this project, we have taken a separate application for web API and separate application client application. So in our case, we will take a separate web API project. Okay. So to take a web API project, we have to select web API. Okay, web API project. Okay, so I'm taking web API project. So select here web API project. There is some authentication options here. So we will learn these things in our upcoming videos. Okay. Okay. So let's take a project. So from here you can select web API and say okay. Once you click on OK, it will create web API project. It takes some time. So once the project is created, you will find all these uh, folders created in the application. Okay. So in this folder, we have like app start folder, and in app start we have a web API config. Okay. Actually, it has created MVC and web API merged project. We have to create only web API projects. So let me take again new project. So new project ASP.NET web API project. From here, we have to select web API. Okay, so these all folders you will find in your project. Okay, so if you go to app start, you will find that a web API config. So here, this is the web API config file, and we will learn means what is the use of these things. Okay, and in this section we have a controllers. Okay, so here by right clicking on the folder, you will find add option, and you can select controller, and from here you can take these are different templates, but we have to always select web API to controller empty. Okay, so we have to select this controller for uh, web API applications. Okay, and say add. So once you will click on add button, you will find this window. So you have to name here for your controller. So I'm giving like masters or item master. So we have given controller name as a item master. So it will create controller with item master name, right? So this is the controller it has created, and it is inherited from API controller class. Okay, you can see that these are some different namespaces which are added like .NET HTTP, right? .web.http. Then these are some common interfaces, sorry, namespaces which we have seen in the ASP.NET also, right? So it will be always inherited from API controller. Okay, and we can have a uh, different web API methods. So here I'm giving like public string get string, right? Return first web API, right? So this way we can define our web API methods. Okay. Now I showed you web API config file, right? So this is the web API config file, and here we have given our web API URL format. So this is the name for URL format. So we have given default API. Then this is the route template values. Like your URL will be like API slash then your controller name slash your ID. Okay. So your controller name means your this name. So whenever you use you will use controller in the URL. So it will be used only your item master name only, right? So controller name is always like postfix for controller naming convention. Okay. And then your action. So this is called action. Let me open our standard metal project. So in this project, you can see that we have that separate application web API, right? And in this we have uh, this is my first what we can say controller, right? In this controller we have these actions, multiple actions. So we have to decorate our action with HTTP verbs. Okay, so HTTP get, we will learn these things. What is HTTP get? What is HTTP post? Okay. Now, one more setting we have to make here in API config file. We have to change URL like controller name slash action name, right? So change it to. We can keep this also, but I will tell you what is the difference between like making these changes, or what is the benefit of having this change done in the project, right? So this way we can mm, set up our web API, right? Now let's run the application. So it is not a web application, so it will not load any kind of form or something. So basically, it is a web API application which is used to communicate with the databases and uh, fetch data or save data. It does the application operations like fetching data from the server or putting data on the server. So basically, it will work with the data only. Okay. So our URL format is like our controller name. So my controller name is like item master, right? So your controller name slash your action name, and the action name is get string. Okay, so once we hit that URL, you can see that it has written some XML value, string format value, and it has written that value first web API, right? So whenever you will call this URL from anywhere, right, you will get this result because we have created that web API in the uh, that web API application, right? So once you hit that, it will call this method, right? And it will return that data. So whatever the data you have written, it means written in that method, it will return that, right? Nice. So it has written that value. So previously we have learned that concept list of some values, right? We have learned a generic concept, right? So I am taking one generic example, public item master class. So here public item ID. These are properties for item master, right? Then string item name. For now, I'm taking only two values, right? So here I'm taking list of what item master class values. So basically, I have defined one web API methods which will return list of item master values. So what all we have to do is like we have to create a list which will have these values and it will return, and we have to return these things, right? So we have to define one list with item master model class, right? Lst equal to new item master model. Then lst dot add. I am adding these values hard code for now, but this values will come from database in our real-time project, right? So first value was item id equal to, for example, 1 I am giving, and item name equal to liquid, right? Then let's add one more value, raw material. Okay, and then finally we have to return this list, right? So basically this method is having return type of list of item master values, right? And it is having two object or object, and each object is having item id and item name value, right? So we have written this, and method name is get items. So it is been that, and http verb is http get. So let's try this if it will work or not with two http verbs. We have to find it. Let's run the application. So what was the URL format? Item master, right? Slash our controller. Sorry, controller slash our method name. Get items. Controller name slash your action name. Okay, so it has called get items method, right? And it will return list of items. So you can see that here on the browser, we have got this item master class, right? It is having item ID 1, item ID, and liquid item, right? Again, we got other item master class object, which is having other value that ID 2 and raw material. So this way we can like return collections, or by using like string parameter, we can return single value. We can also post data to the web API, but we will see these things in the our upcoming session. So I think you would have understood the basics of web API project, right? And how we can define it and how we can call it. Now let's flip to our document where we have a basic understanding of web API. So first point is what is web API in ASP.NET? So web API is a programming interface application type that provides communication of interaction uh, between software applications. Web API is often used to provide an interface for websites and client applications to have data access. Web APIs can be used to access data from the database and save data back to the database. So basically, it is used to like communicate with the database server, and it can like save data, or it can like retrieve data from the database, and we can provide the interface. So basically, providing interface means what? Providing data to the UI, or getting data from the UI and putting it into the our database, right? So ASP.NET Web API is a framework that make it easy to build HTTP web service that reaches a range of client, including like browser, mobile application, desktop application, and IoTs. So basically it is used to like communicate with these things, including like mobile application, desktop, and IoTs. So here is they have given one diagram, and they have like tried to tell us how web API works with the different sources. So here is our web API service, and it is communicating with the HTTP request and HTTP response. So it is communicating with the HTTP request and HTTP response with web form, sorry, Windows form. And at the same time, it is communicating with the web application also. Here you can see that with the HTTP request and HTTP response. And it is having like a JSON, XML, or there are some other formats. So it is communicating using this formats. And at the same time, it can communicate with any mobile devices also, right? So the main benefit of using web API is like what we can do is, for example, there is a client, for example, Flipkart. You must have seen Flipkart, right? So if you go to, let me go to Flipkart site. Okay, now we are at Flipkart, right? And this is the Flipkart site. But let me ask you one question. If you go to mobile application for the same site for Flipkart, so do you see the same UI design there? So the answer is no, right? Because they have created a separate website or a web application for Windows or for browsers user, right? And they have created separate mobile application for uh, our mobile application. So the mobile applications are developed in the Android, and browser application must have developed in like ASP.NET or Java or any front end language, or this like combination of front and back end languages, right? But the common thing in between them is like at the both the places you will find the same data, right? Means if you will log in from here with the username which we have logged in from your mobile, you will find the same order, same data, or the same items, whatever the data part is, you will find same at the both places. So how do they have like achieved these things? So they have achieved these things using web API, because there is only one web API in the background, right? Which is connected with the two mobile application, right? Sorry, two application. One is your website or web application, and the other one is your what we can say our mobile application, right? And these both applications are communicating with the single web API, the way they have showed in the this diagram, right? At the same time, it is communicating with the mobile application for mobile UI interfaces, and at the same time, it is communicating with the web application with the web application interface, right? So this is achieved by web API. If web API was not there, so what they needed to do that they needed to create a separate application including dial bell model or your database communication, everything for mobile application, and same they needed to create for web application also, right? मतलब यहाँ पे क्या प्रॉब्लम हुआ होता, फॉर एग्जांपल उनको क्या करना पड़ता है कि बेसिकली मोबाइल एप्लीकेशन के लिए कंप्लीट एप्लीकेशन रीडेवलप करना पड़ता, राइट? और द सेम थिंग उनको वेब एप्लीकेशन के लिए भी करना जरूरी था. एंड इट वाज बिकॉज ऑफ अगर वेब एपीआई नहीं होता तो ये मतलब उनको ये प्रोसेस से जाना पड़ता था, ठीक है? बट अभी यहाँ पे क्या केस है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल दिस इज माई वेब एप्लीकेशन, राइट? नाउ I am having that web API application which is connected with these things, dial well model, and it is communicating with the databases. Web API having that RESTful services, we can call it from web application, or I can create create one more application, that is my Android application, and I will communicate that Android application with these things, right? मतलब ये मुझे फिर से डेवलप करने की जरूरत नहीं, I have to just develop redevelop the client. Okay, so that is the benefit of using web API. Okay, now they have uh, introduced here us with the IoT devices. So I will tell you what is IoT devices. So it's internet links that have a IP address and communicate with other internet enabled devices and objects. For example, security system, electronic application, desktop applications, mobile. So all application which is having an ability to connect with the internet is called IoT devices. So it can be like your आपके घर का लॉक होता है ना. So now मतलब now you know that there are smart lamps, smart locks, then smart TV. So these all things are comes under like IoT devices. So we can create web APIs for these things, and we can yeah, achieve whatever we want to do with these things, right? Now next is what is RESTful service. So REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It is introduced in 2000 by Roy Fielding. Okay. In REST architecture, a REST service simply provides access to resources and the REST client accesses and present the resources. Okay. Here each resource is identified by URIs, global IDs. REST uses various representation to represent the resource like text, JSON, and XML. JSON is now the most popular format being used in the web services. ठीक है, JSON right now the JSON is the most populated format because it is very lightweight compared to other formats. So I will show you means what is JSON, how does it work, and REST is the architecture where your user sends the request through URI, and that URI is kind of like globally created a unique URI, and using that URI it understand which method should get called. So here the way we have called our web API when we ran it, right? When we ran our web API, so we called it using URI, right? Using this format. Okay. So there are some constraint of the REST services. These are so there are some rules designed that are applied to establish the distinct characteristics of the REST architecture style. So the format REST constraints are like client server. So there must be one client and one server to communicate with these things. And stateless. Second is like stateless. So stateless means it does not store any value when it communicate in between. Means when client send request to the server, it does not store any value. So in this diagram we have seen web API send or get request from the web application or mobile application. So in this in between them, it does not store any kind of data. It will get the data from web API and put it to the client application. When it will get the new request, that time it will have a new data. So the previous data, whatever it was, it has removed or forgot or deleted, right? Then cache. So we can cache the frequently requested pages or frequently requested web API services. So we will see these things in the future in our upcoming sessions. Okay. Then interfaces, uniform contract, then layered system. So we will see these things one by one in our upcoming sessions. Okay. And then code on demand. So code on demand means what? We can define the code which should be like called on the requested services or as per the requirement. Okay. Then next is like HTTP methods. So there are different kind of HTTP methods. So these are like HTTP GET, then put and delete. So these are number of services HTTP verbs available. So we will see these things in detail in our upcoming sessions. So GET is used to read or access the resources from the web API. So put is used to create a new resource. Means basically when we have to post data to web API, that time we can use put. Then delete is used to remove resources. So delete is used to basically remove data from the our database server. and post is used to update an existing resource or create a new resource. Okay, so again, post is used to, we can like update any item existing data, or we can create a new data on the server. Okay. Okay, so there is a last point which is in this we should cover in this session, that is difference between ASP.NET Web API and WCF. So Web API, there is one more service, that is web service, and I think we have seen web services in the ASP.NET sessions, but there is another API architecture, that is WCF. Okay, so we will see the difference between them. So in our like a training, we are going to learn only web API, but you should understand the difference between web server, sorry, WCF and web API. So we are taking this. Okay. So we have already seen what is a web API. So again, they have given like ASP.NET Web API support for MVC application feature, that are controller, media, formatters, routing, etc. Okay. It is platform for creating REST services. It is framework for creating HTTP services. Responses can be formed by the API's media type formatter into the JavaScript object notation. Means everything is like communicated with the JSON object, and okay, and extensible markup language or XML format. So there are different formats supported by Web API. Okay. This is an architecture, so I am not going to explain this because it will not understand at this like level. You have to go through all of these things, then you will understand these things. Okay. Next point is like Windows Communication Foundation. So WCF is also framework, but to create service oriented application, it can send the data synchronously from one endpoint service to another service. Okay. The endpoint service can be a part of the continuous available services. It is hosted by the IIS. There are some important points of WCF. So WCF stands for, sorry, sends the data asynchronously. Okay. It is secure service to process the business transaction. The message that is sent can be single character or a word sent as XML. Okay. So it is basically work with the XML format. Okay. It includes the chat service that allows the two people for exchanging data. Okay. So it is used to communicate with the two-way communication, right? This is the architecture, and we are not like going much deeper into that. But in the last one, they have shown when to choose Web API and when to choose WCF service. You can choose the Web API when you want to create service that uses the HTTP feature. So Web API work with only HTTP protocol only, right? Such as the request and response header, URIs versioning. Okay. So you choose the Web API if you want to expose the HTTP service to the broad range of client, like this includes mobile phone, iPhone, browser, means different devices. Okay. Now define the reason of choosing WCF, right? You can choose the WCF if you want to create the service that support one-way messaging, message queuing, duplex communication. Okay. You can choose the WCF if you want to create the service that uses the fast transport channels such as TCP, UDP, named pipe. Okay. So it is basically used to, means WCF is basically used to communicate with the multiple protocols like TCP, UDP, duplex, hub duplex, queue mechanism, right? So that is the difference between Web API and WCF services. So WCF service is like more complex to define compared to Web API, but it is communicate with the different protocols. So whenever you have a requirement to communicate with the different protocol, in that case you must go with the WCF service. Okay, here is some differences they have given. Make sure you guys will go through these things. So first is like WCF ships with .NET framework to create the secure, reliable, and high profile development solutions. So it is Web API is open source and also ships with the .NET framework. So Web API is available in the different languages also. Okay. So these are some points. Make sure you go through these things. Okay, so this all is in this chapter.